Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Unleashing Potentials podcast. Today's special guest is Demarra. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Bernadette. I'm really excited about this conversation.
Me too. Me too. Can you tell us where you're tuning in from?
Yeah, I'm tuning in from Kalamazoo, Michigan, which is the southwest part of the state. We're right in the middle of Detroit and Chicago for the many people who are listening who probably have never heard of Kalamazoo.
Yeah. When you said Kalamazoo, I'm like, where's that? Which country?
Exactly.
Yeah. I'm normally good if someone tells me the country. Yeah, but that's really cool. That's an interesting name. Is it a town or a city?
Yeah, it's a city, and it's an indigenous name. So, we're native land.
Wow.
And so the word Kalamazoo is connected to the Potawatomi tribe, I believe.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. That's really cool. Welcome
Yeah,
to the
yeah.
podcast. Are
Thank
you
you.
ready to
So
party?
glad to be here. I am ready to party.
Can you tell us who you are and what you do?
Yeah. So again, Demarra West, and I operate a wellness company called Be Well, Beautiful Woman. It has a global focus and it really focuses on Indigenous wellness practices to help women to center their healing and their liberation so that they can lead and live on their own terms. And I support women in doing that through day and overnight retreats and a group mastermind coaching program, a virtual community called Be My Sister's Keeper, the Be Well Beautiful Woman podcast, and a lot of education like summits. I'm getting ready to host my ninth one since COVID called the Abundance Summit in December. And we've got some new things that are on the horizon as well. So, really focus on all things wellness for women. And we'll be expanding on that vision as we move forward and really focusing on all people as we build on this great foundation of Be Well, Beautiful Woman.
Wow, I love that. Yeah, I,
Thank
I
you.
love what you do. Yeah, you're welcome. When did you first started doing what you're doing and what inspired you to do it?
Yeah, so I've been an entrepreneur for 15 years. I started a consulting practice
Mhm.
15 years ago called Change Agent Consulting. And that was right around the time that I was in graduate school to become a therapist. So I have a master's degree in clinical mental health and I worked in the field and I'm fully licensed. And that was the beginning, I would say, of intentionally um, really taking a look at mental health, but not necessarily from a standpoint of like myself and my own journey, but more so the people that I was going to be called to support. And I grew up with complex trauma, and so of course I knew that my drive to become a therapist was connected to my childhood in some way. But what I didn't know is that I had a lot of healing that I needed to do as well. And, I was under the school of thought that, that was the past. I was a kid. There's no point in focusing on that. And kind of pushed it off to the side. And, like marriage check, motherhood check, entrepreneur check, grad school check.
Mhm.
And then I realized that Me Too, and which is actually the title of a book that I'll be releasing at the end of November called Me Too, A Therapist's Journey to Heal from Complex Trauma, Find Liberation and Joy. And then I just found myself, because I desired to be well, to find opportunities for me to cultivate my wellness through mainly Indigenous wellness modalities. So, yeah, I became a Reiki master and teacher, a yoga teacher, trained in meditation, forest bathing, breath work, emotional freedom techniques. And I started to apply these practices to myself, like long before I ever integrated them into my work. And these healing modalities have been the things that have helped me to heal myself and to find boundless joy and peace and abundance in every area of my life. And so that's the gift that I want to be able to give to the world, right? Like the very gift of these practices to myself, and knowing so many people that have used these very practices to live a life of wellness and to live well right now, not in the afterlife.
Yeah. Wow. I love everything that you do and how you blend everything together and how impactful I believe it is. Just the word beautiful woman. Because in
Mm,
society, most women, they do face constant judgment and body shaming and all of it. For you to help them realize that they are beautiful in spite of. I
yeah,
admire that.
yeah.
I love that. Yeah.
Oh,
If you
thank
don't mind,
you.
you're welcome. Can you touch a little bit on the work that you do when it comes to mental wellness?
Yeah. So when I think about mental wellness, I think about the body as a whole, right? Mind, body, spirit, and everything that we see as possible for our lives and our vibration point and how we feel is connected to how we think.
Mm,
And usually, how we think is for all of us, and I wouldn't even say usually, all of us have been socialized to see
mm,
ourselves in a certain way based on the identities that are really obvious to the world or the identities that are not so obvious to the world, in the context of society and our families and the media. And this is why, for me, helping women to really identify for themselves, right, who they are and what it means to them to operate in that identity, deciding for themselves, and really reclaiming a lot of power that we have given away unbeknownst to us. Because anytime that we're living our lives less than, out of authenticity, uh, in service of others, that can often be harmful to us if we're only taking care of other people. Our light, of course, is supposed to be there for other people and the care of other people. Um, and so for me, like it's just really, really important that people understand the power that they have with their mind to
mm,
feel well and to be well. Essentially, that saying, is the cup half empty or is it half full? Well, we get to decide, right? And as we choose um more positive thoughts, as we choose to be in gratitude, we do have more things to be grateful for, because when we think about things, those thoughts ultimately expand, right?
mhm,
And those thinking thoughts just make us feel good. They make other people feel good. And it actually it increases our frequency, which allows us to receive more of what God, universe, source, creator has for us so that we can live well. It's like the difference between someone that recognizes that a gift has been presented to them and then having the courage to say yes to it versus someone who doesn't even see it or refuses to accept it, right? And so I say a lot, and I've done a talk about this on numerous occasions, and I use this phrasing in my work often, which I actually got from the Abundance book, is that, people are our number one pathway to prosperity. And because people are our number one pathway to prosperity, part of our work is to be healed enough to understand that we're being supported always. And people are the main way that we get the support that we need towards whatever it is that we desire to have in this life. Now, we have to do the work, but even saying yes is work, right?
mhm,
Even the work to have a level of consciousness to see how universe, source, God, creator has manifested to support us, that's work, right? To even get to that point of the recognition, or having the courage to walk through the door, even though you're really afraid because it's never been done before, or you're afraid of what people are going to think of you, or you're afraid of what's going to end, or all the reasons why we're afraid of something, right? And the opposite of that is always going to be love, right? Love and courage are kind of one and the same, because it's catapulting us to go to places that are deeper within ourselves, which helps us to create depth, more depth within our lives in every single way.
yeah, yeah, I love that. Thank you for sharing. Um, yeah. I'm just reading quick through your bio, and I'm seeing some really, really important keywords. Inclusion, equity, and just for women to belong, because we don't often feel like we belong. We exist sometimes without knowing where to belong, because
Mm.
that's what society teaches us very young, that we're supposed to fit where we're not fitting, if that makes sense. So let's focus a little bit on women's equity and inclusion and having them to be part of society without covering up who they truly are. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so authenticity is a very powerful thing, right? And
Mm,
our socialization will have us operating as a caricature ultimately.
mhm,
And we can gain things from that place, but it's not going to feel as good as being in our truth,
mhm,
right? Because whatever we are is what we're going to attract.
mhm,
And even if our essence is our authentic essence is the opposite of what we're projecting to the world, we're going to attract what we're projecting to the world, essentially.
mhm,
And so that inauthenticity is going to carry over everywhere, right? I'll never forget going to a workshop a couple years ago, and this gentleman had talked about, was from the Flint area, which is a high poverty area within Michigan, and had left and was working for like a venture capital firm and like doing financially very well, self-made millionaire, if not close to a billionaire. And he said, for 15 years, I would drive to work and I would listen to, Notorious B.I.G. And then I would pull into the parking lot and I would straighten myself up and I would get out of the car and I would turn on, right?
yeah,
And whenever we are living, so you think about that, this man was living a double life, essentially,
mhm,
right? The life of how he showed up in this space, because as a Black man, he was told this is how you have to be successful, particularly in a world where you're not going to see many of you, right? And so he got to the point of his liberation where he said, that's enough.
mhm,
I'm not going to leave myself in this vehicle anymore.
mhm,
But imagine that was 15 years of his life that he lived out of place, right? So in one breath, we can say, well, gosh, he gained all of this financial wealth. But if financial wealth was the ingredient to happiness, then we wouldn't have wealthy people that commit suicide
mm,
or that are miserable
yeah,
or that are, so the happiness quotient that goes along with making money is actually, it has a very low threshold.
mm,
What really is sustainable joy connected to this idea of authenticity is our ability to do enough work within ourselves to really face ourselves,
mm,
to
mhm,
remember, right? Because whoever we are, when we think back to when we were children, little girls, and exploring the world and precocious and wild, and
mhm,
that's who we are,
yeah,
right? This is not it's a returning to. And so, what research shows is that by about the time that a child is 5, their creativity wanes,
mhm,
right? Their zest for life, because the adults around them have squandered it,
yeah,
their natural essence. And so, when I think about healing and liberation,
mhm,
it is an act of, it's a revolutionary act, as in the words of, I believe, Alice Walker,
mhm,
or
mhm,
yeah, it might, one of the great thought leaders, right? And because it really is, because we're going against everything that we've been taught about what it means to be woman, about what it means to be poor, about what it means to be Black, about what it means to be queer, whatever the identities are. And so the invitation is for us to do the work necessary for us to stand in the fullness of who we are, because from that place, actually, that's where flow resides,
mhm,
right? That's where life becomes very easy. That's where things we attract things without even having a conscious thought. You know, we're certainly on some level thinking of it because we're attracting it.
Mhm.
But sometimes a desire can be such that we don't even know the desire exists yet.
Mm.
It's so deep inside of us, right? It hasn't taken form. And then something presents itself and it's like, oh my gosh, where have you been my whole life? I didn't even know that I wanted you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Right.
yeah.
And so authenticity is worth fighting for, you
Mm,
know, and to be who we are just by ourselves without any other intersectional lens, right? Just to be who we are without other factors to consider in terms of intersectional identity.
mhm,
um, that's hard. And then when you couple that with some of the ideology
mhm,
that is poison, right? Because it has the ability to poison our thinking, to make us feel as if we are not worthy, to
mhm,
make us to have us making decisions to accept things that are so less than what we're valued,
mhm,
right?
mm,
And as we get um, this idea and this reality that we're powerful co-creators,
yeah,
that we don't have to accept anything other than what we desire and whatever we want in life, no matter how small, no matter how big, as we do the work to bring those things into our life through the cultivation of mind and through the physical work in the natural world,
mm,
life is very sweet from that place.
yeah, yeah. And it takes a type of freedom that most of us are afraid of jumping off the edge, open our wings just to see what it feels like, because we've been told to suppress who we are, our identity, and what to believe. And as you were talking, I was thinking of a poem that I wrote. I don't memorize it, but it's called Welcome to Society. And just
Mm,
all the things that society expect you to do. And if you don't do them, that's who you are. If you do them, they want you to do more. It's just enough is never enough.
yeah,
And it takes strong women like you and me to say, "Nope, don't care." Right?
yeah.
Right. And I love that you're talking about race, because I've talked about that on the podcast as well. It's something I'm passionate about to advocate about. And
Mhm.
unfortunately, most people do not want to touch on that subject. One, they feel embarrassed, they feel ashamed, they don't want to talk about it, they don't want people to judge them or see them a certain way. When really, I'm like, okay, there's an elephant in the room. You keep falling and tripping over it. It's right there. Why don't we talk about it? So I
Yeah.
appreciate you talking about it, right? It's
Mhm.
something I've had to talk about. And I think I said to someone, it must have been a family member I was talking to, I said, look at me. What do you see when you look at me? And,
Mm,
they go to the color and I'm like, no, what do you see? It's what's in my heart. It has nothing to do with this.
mm.
Right? And I love that you're teaching women to be driven and to stand up tall and to find their voice and identity.
Yeah. So there's so many things that beautiful things that you imparted that I want to reflect back. And you
Mm,
know, the very thing that we're talking about in terms of being in our authentic identity and really loving the fullness of who we are. The fact that people don't want to talk about it is really just a reflection of the fact that they haven't been liberated, right? There's
yeah.
some real healing. Anytime we don't want to confront parts of ourselves, not because we are defined about any aspect of our identity, but we're saying that I love the fullness of every single aspect of who I am. And then
Mm,
that last part that you said is so powerful about the fact that, like, what do you see when you see me? As we do conscious work,
yeah.
part of what we should see in people, and I think this is in part what you're saying, is that
Mm,
I'm spirit and you're spirit,
mhm,
right? Yes, this is my vessel, and I want you to love the fullness of me, including my vessel.
mhm,
And part of seeing the fullness of me is being able to see the inside of me,
yeah.
right?
Mm,
And that's what consciousness work can do. I say often, I see people long before they would ever even know that I see them.
Mm,
long before because I feel their energy. I feel what's on the inside. So that's my pulse for whether or not this person
mhm.
is safe, is a safe haven for me,
Yeah.
right? And whether they're a safe haven for me or not, like my mother has said on numerous occasions, we can get in the ring with anybody. And part of loving people is being able to meet them where they are, and loving ourselves enough to have the appropriate boundaries set
Mhm.
based on people, right? And based on our needs, irrespective to other people and who they are and how they show up. So, I love what you said, that I mean, I am spirit, you are spirit, we are spirit. And when we're doing spirit work, we're able to see that in other people. And that's, so when we say things like, oh, I'm not vibing with them, or I'm not really, like, I'm not feeling their energy, like
Mhm.
that's in part what we're saying, essentially.
Mm,
Are you far enough along on the journey in congruence with my journey for us to be able to vibe in this space together? Now, whether we are or we're not, because we have placements, right? And so that's one of the things that I've learned about relationships, that everybody is not going to be everything for us. And so we have to ascertain where are people's appropriate place in our lives, and
mm,
what are the things that we're willing to accept and not, in concert to relationship, related to the love that we have for self and the love that we want to be able to extend to humanity.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, I love that you mentioned that too. It's just being conscious of what we're conscious of, because most of us don't know what we're conscious of. We're carrying around mom's beliefs or grandma's beliefs, and they're from a different generation. I'm a 90s
Yeah.
baby. Like I can only go back so far before I'm like, what? Can you translate? Right?
Mm-hmm.
And then
Yeah.
it's to find, I've had to do this for myself, to find who I am. Who am I? And for
Mm-hmm.
so long it was hard to look in the mirror because I was told how I needed to look to feel good. But how about what I wanted to see to feel good, right?
Yeah.
And it's hard because commercials gets me, and I don't watch them, right? They put on makeup on women and they're doing natural beauty stuff, which
Mm-hmm.
I mean nothing's wrong with it, but show some stretch marks and some unexpected things that you wouldn't hide. And that's the kind of raw beauty that I crave to see every day in women
Yeah.
and as a culture as a whole collectively.
Yeah. So, I laughed because it reminded me of a lyric from Kendrick Lamar's one of his tracks, and
Yes.
so show me something natural with like a,
Mm.
I won't say the word, with some
Yeah.
stretch marks.
Yeah.
So I love that, right? And so when
Yeah.
people say things like, well, the only reason why you see this person looking great all the time in the limelight is because that's what they want to project. And I'm like, well, that's fine. And nobody looks like that all the time. And
Yeah.
that's fine. That's what you look like. That's what you look like at your optimal best. That's beautiful. It's beautiful, right? But I think to show the world the fullness of who we are, the light, the dark,
Yeah.
the realness of our journeys, the ways that we have, the lessons we've learned, the lessons that we're still trying to cultivate, the wins, the struggles,
Yeah.
that's what makes us humane, right? That's our humanity.
Mhm.
And in life, we're on a journey. And I love the worthwhile work that you did, Bernadette, to be good with who you are,
Yeah.
because when I look at you, I see a beautiful woman that is radiating light,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
And if we want to wear makeup and that's where we are, do it, right? But don't do it because you think you should do it, right? Like, part of being authentic is doing it the way you want to do it, in spite of how it lands with other people. It's about seeing the beauty in even our flaws, right? It's about acknowledging the things that we love about our body and the things that we're hoping to love, we're working to love. So it's all of that. And something you said earlier made me think about the four agreements. And, as we are working to be authentic and really be deeply invested in understanding our own worth, not the worth that the world puts on us, but our own inherent worth, then it doesn't matter if people say good things about us or bad things about us. Now it feels good. Like, who doesn't want to be told that they're beautiful or they're
Yeah.
smart or,
Yeah.
they rocked out on a project. But the reality is that we should already know that.
Mm.
We should already know that these are the goods. I'm so certain of who I am that your words, no matter how beautiful and uplifting or tearing down that they can be, it's not going to define who I am, because I am certain of who I am.
Yeah.
That is ultimate liberation,
Mm.
right? And that is not work that we arrive at. That's work that we work to stay in tune with,
Mm.
because the world is going to be coming at us all with all kinds of things. And one minute somebody's going to be talking about how much they love us, and the next minute they're going to be talking about how terrible we are. Right? And like, so it's
Yep.
and we have to decide what is the truth in that. Because
Mm.
sometimes we have done something that needs to be corrected, right? But we have to decide for ourselves what is true. And then we have to be accountable to that truth. Or I shouldn't even say we have to, but the invitation is such. The invitation is always for us to be in our power, to
Mhm.
be in a state of joy, to be in a state of flow, to be in a state of purpose.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. And I think all of us crave to belong somewhere. And it's sad that some of us do feel that we don't even belong in our own skin, or we don't belong in a family group. I feel that way with my family, at least, right? And
Yeah.
it's like, who am I separate from my siblings? Who am I separate from my parents? Who am I separate from the illnesses doctors diagnosed me with? And it's something I always echo, is that people are not the illnesses that they're diagnosed with. After all, it's a book. I appreciate doctors and all the things that they do, but in my opinion, it was a little too much for me. Right? It was like
Mhm.
flashing in front of my face all the time, like, okay, right? Because how can sometimes they expect people to feel good if they're always being reminded of the worst of what they've had in a season of weakness or darkness?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really important what you have highlighted, because it speaks to the law of attraction. And that even as as we're trying to make sense of who we are or what our challenges are, and we happen to get a diagnosis, for example, as you have highlighted, we have to be careful that that doesn't become a part of our identity to the point that we allow it to block us from being well, right?
Mhm.
Because if we think about mindset, part of pathology, and I'm a licensed therapist, I believe in the power of therapy, but
Yeah.
I also believe in the power of a number of practices that we have explored, right? That I talked about, that I'm trained in, that I use in my work, that I use on myself every day. It's rare for me to get out of bed without doing Reiki on myself. And
Mm.
I'm not doing Reiki on myself for the sake of doing Reiki. I'm doing Reiki on myself because I understand the power of Reiki to harness my energy,
Yeah.
to allow me to really be in control of my energy, so that I can matriculate through my day in the way that I want to, with more resilience, essentially, right?
Yeah.
And so, back to what you said about, diagnoses, we have to be very careful that we don't allow labels to become a barrier for what it is that we're working to cultivate. Because, I believe that any kind of mental ailment, and maybe even in the most severe cases, maybe medication is needed, for example, to
Mm.
stabilize someone.
Yeah.
But I even think in the most severe cases of pathology, that as we reframe our mind and as we identify for ourselves who we are, because our identity is not hindered upon the people who accept or reject us.
Yeah.
Our identity and who we are, it's our birthright. We came, we are here.
Mm.
We are who we are.
Mhm.
We
Mhm.
are who we are. And so the work is to figure out, who are we? And, it's hard. It is in the context of families, because you said it, we have a psychological need,
Mhm.
an emotional need to
Mhm.
be cared for and accepted by families. And in fact, the part of the brain that that ignites when assault happens is the same part of the brain that ignites when we're rejected. So
Mhm.
this is why it hurts so bad, right? Particularly for people, for the people that we love, right? The people that we love and we want to care for us. But then if we allow that rejection to define us, then we are actually suffering on top of the suffering. We are saying, we accept this narrative that you have bestowed upon me, versus saying, I reject this narrative that you've bestowed upon me, and I am worthy simply because I am here.
Mhm.
And I'm going to do everything in my power to see myself as worthy.
Yeah.
And wellness practices allow that to come to the light for us.
Mhm. Yeah, I love that. Yeah. So are those some of the topics that you talk about on your podcast? Tell us more about your podcast.
Oh gosh, yeah. We on my podcast, as I imagine that for you as well, there's such a range, right? Wellness is always the theme. So there's never a time when I have a guest on and we don't talk about wellness.
Mhm.
And it's amazing, no matter how many times I ask that question, I get a different answer every single
Mhm.
time. And so I love that it speaks to the individual journeys that we're on and how practices, there's a myriad of practices, there's a myriad of ways that we can implement practices in our lives so that we can be well. But we talk about things around leadership and family and relationships and financial prosperity and purpose. Um, Anything you can think of. And sometimes it's thematic around like a summit that I might be hosting. So, for example, my last summit, which was called the Women Who Write to Liberate Summit, featured all authors. And so they all did a podcast interview, like that their audio version was on the podcast. And so, of course, all of them, all different people, their genres and their stories and the number of books, like very, very different people. And yet they all wrote books around this theme of liberation, and they're all women, right? So you have to be an individual that identifies as a woman, and you have to be doing really compelling work in the world, right, on yourself and the light that you're sharing in the world. And so we set out to find women this way, but then also we have women that come to us that fit, the mold of what we're looking for.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's really cool. Yes. What are some of your coaching approaches that you use to help women?
Yeah, so I'm a professional certified coach, and I got trained probably 8 years ago. So you're kind of trained as a generalist, if you will,
Mm.
from doing group coaching to strategy coaching to all kinds of things, and from working one-on-one, C-suite, first-time leaders, the whole gamut.
Mm.
Um, so I have a lot of tools in my toolbox to support people. And I certainly use my formal training as a coach, but then I also use a very integrated approach.
Mhm.
So I use sometimes mindful practice. We may ground before we begin. A lot of visioning,
Mm.
accountability, right? So there's always action that's embedded in the work. We spend a good amount of our time reflecting and going deep in terms of what's important for them, how they derive meaning from it, what they ultimately want to do about it. And then we get anchored into some action. And then we check in on that at the beginning of the next session to, see how they did and to further explore, And so it is definitely a process of co-creation.
Mm.
And I say often the thing that you present with is not always the thing. And in fact, it often is not the thing. The thing that you present with, we say there's a deeper agenda, So my job is to help you get to the deeper agenda. And then, of course, there's a transformational agenda that far exceeds what either of us could have ever thought, as you show up and you do the work, And so coaching can be a very powerful mechanism that helps women and of course anyone focus on the future. So that's the thing that differentiates therapy from coaching. And therapy focuses on the past to connect to the
Mhm.
present and to then link up to the future. And coaching says, okay, I know that you have this past, but I really want to help you curate a massive future that you want and to support you in getting there. And I think you can get to transformation both ways, right? I just, happen to use a lot more coaching in my life, in part because of the things that you talked about earlier. Therapy is rooted in the medical model. And, even though my therapeutic orientation is person centered, and that's the closest thing that you're going to get to a strength based model when it comes to therapy, not saying that therapeutic modalities don't work, because they do and they can be very effective.
Mhm.
But research also shows that therapy has limited efficacy, um, because just talking things out doesn't get things out of the body. And trauma lives in the body. It's stored on a cellular level in the body, which is why somatic practices are so powerful. The movement, because you're literally getting blocked energy to be released from the body. Blocked energy, meaning those blocked negative emotions that we harbor when we don't begin the healing process, or there are residuals from healing because it got interrupted somehow.
Mhm. Yeah, I love that. Thank you for sharing. I have two questions for you before we wrap up. The first one, what is the meaning of life for you?
Oh gosh. That's such a,
Thank
that's such a big, beautiful question.
you.
The meaning of life for me is to live well now,
Mm, I love that.
is to be happy now, is
Mhm,
to say yes to life now,
mhm,
is to share our light now,
mhm,
is to do all the things that we set out to have the courage,
mhm,
to have the courage to live life out loud
mhm.
and on purpose and with purpose
Yeah.
and with pleasure.
Mm, beautiful answers. Wow.
Yeah.
Love that. Love that. Wow.
Yeah, I love that
Yeah,
question. Such a
yeah,
beautiful, and not that I haven't heard the question before, read the question before,
yeah.
but something about being asked in this moment, it's like, ooh, that's a it's a heavy question. It's a
Yeah,
heavy question. Beautiful, beautiful question.
yeah, thank you. Where can my listeners find you and support your work?
Yeah. So individuals can check us out at bewellbeautifulwoman.com. That's bewellbeautifulwoman.com. Sign up for our e-news. That's the best way for people to be in the know about all things Be Well Beautiful Woman. That comes out once a week directly to people's inboxes.
Mhm,
They can follow us on Instagram at the letter B, so not BE, but just the letter B, Well Beautiful. And then we have a Facebook and a LinkedIn business page that people can also follow and get content. So I would love for folks to connect with us. And, our podcast, of course, is on all the major streaming platforms that exist. And look forward to staying connected as the spirit is leading us to.
yeah, awesome. Well, Demarra, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for sharing your journey with us and passion. And most importantly, thank you for helping women find themselves again.
Thank you, Bernadette, for what you do and all the beautiful content that you put out there. And it's really, really an honor to share this sacred space with you. So thank you, Queen, for all the work that you do and
Oh,
all the
thank
work you
you.
will continue to do to
Thank
share
you.
your light with the world.
Thank you so much. Thank you.